Okay, it's time to assemble Elihu. So to begin, we are taking both inner leg linings and we are placing them right side together, and then just choose either color of your yarn. Here we go, got an end. And get a slip knot on your hook, okay? And then all we're going to do is slip stitch, holding the right sides together. We're going to slip stitch all 27 stitches across the top. So I'm going through the very first stitch, okay, both layers, both the top loops on the very first stitch of both layers, okay, and grabbing my working yarn, not my tail, okay, yarn over and pull through everything. Okay, and then I'm going through the next stitch, both layers. Okay, so I go underneath both loops of the blue stitch, both loops of the yellow stitch, yarn over, pull through everything. And I'm just going to keep doing that under all 4 of the loops, both top loops of the blue, both top loops of the yellow, so both top loops of color A, both top loops of color B, yarn over, pull through everything. And there you go. I'm just going to do that all the way across the top of the inner leg lining. All right, we're getting to the end here, and I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to go through this very last 2. All right, here we go. And now I'm going to clip my yarn, and I'm actually going to go ahead and wrap that around my needle and do kind of a chain, pull that through nice and tight, and I am just going to really quickly, I'll show you how I'm going to weave in these ends. I'm just going to take the ends and just kind of run them through the tops of these stitches a little bit, just to weave them in. All right, this will all be inside Elihu, so that's not a big deal. And just kind of run them through that way a little bit, run them through this way a little bit. All right, and then give them a little clip. So now I have Elihu body A with the wrong side up, and I'm taking our little inner leg pieces and I'm putting inner leg B on top of Elihu A so that our wrong sides are touching. Now I'm going to go over to his little back side, okay? All right, so that's where I need to start, is his back side. I'm taking my color A yarn, making a loose slip knot with a nice long tail, removing my hook from the yarn. I am putting my hook through the top 2 stitches of the next unworked stitch on the color B inner leg, okay? And that will go from the front to the back, and then through from back to front the color A Elihu on the marked stitch on his body, okay? So we're going from the color B inner leg through the color A body, next stitch on the inner leg that hasn't been worked, and the marked stitch on the body. I'm now taking that slip knot on my color A yarn and I'm pulling it through all of that. And now I'm going to start making slip stitches. So I'm going to go through the next stitch of the inner leg and the next stitch of the body, then yarn over, pull through all of it. Okay, very first one's a little difficult, there we go, but then the rest of them are going to get a lot easier. Now go through the top loops of the next stitch on the inner leg and the top loops of the next stitch on the body, yarn over, pull through everything. So I am just slip stitching this together evenly, 1 stitch on the inner leg, 1 stitch on the body, slip stitching them together, and I'm going to do that all the way around until I get to the marker on the other side. All right, and we should have the same number of stitches in pretty much the same places because of the way that border pattern was written. But if you have to finagle something somewhere because maybe you didn't start in exactly the right place, or maybe you made a little mistake somewhere, don't fret, that's fine. If somewhere you go through, you know, color A and color B stitch, and then you go through the same color A stitch and a different color B stitch because they weren't lined up exactly, that's fine. If you have to kind of gather something a little bit that way once, it is totally not a big deal. And actually, I think I might have to do that right here. I'm going through the same, so I just went through this yellow, right? And into this blue, but I think I probably should have started one stitch higher. So now you have two choices. Since this is just at the very beginning, I can either, here, let's see, let's line things up. There. Yeah, see, I should have started in this stitch, not in this one. So if you were really far along when you did that, what you might want to do is then next time on your next stitch, go through the same yellow stitch and the next blue stitch, and that will gather it. But since I'm so close to where I started, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my hook through this stitch to remind me this is the stitch I need, and then through this stitch, and I'm going to pull everything back and just start it again, okay? It's not a big deal. All right, I could have pre-counted things. I didn't. Life goes on. It's not a big deal. And that's just because we didn't put a marker on this piece. So I started with the wrong stitch by mistake. It's not a big deal. There are so many ways you can fix it that it doesn't really matter. And again, it's a stuffy, you know, big stuffed toy that is gonna get smushed and loved. It's okay if there's a tiny bit of wonkiness that won't even look wonky when it's all done. You won't even notice. Trust me on this. So again, not as much as it's, you know, the pattern is written and everything should line up properly. If you make that little mistake by like starting with the wrong stitch or whatever, it's not really a big deal. Life goes on. Okay, so here we go. Gonna go around, and this time when I get to that turn, everything should turn at the same point. Yes, it does actually look like the corner is cornering the same rate this time. There we go. So now I'm just gonna keep on going all the way around until I get to the next stitch marker. Okay, so now we're finishing up this side. I'm going to keep on stitching until I get all the way to the marked stitch, right? Maybe. Come on, go through. Thank you. And marked stitch. There we go. Okay, now I'm taking off this marker and cutting the yarn, grabbing it, pulling it through, giving it a tighten, and we will deal with that later. Now we need to do the same thing but opposite. So we've got color B body, and I think in the pattern I actually started with the color B body and the color A inner leg. So I may have done these two in the opposite order, but I think you can figure that out. All right, so I have color B body with the wrong side up, and now color A legs on top. Okay, so our wrong sides are together. And now I have color B yarn. And we're going to go ahead and I'm gonna double check now to make sure, again, this time I'm actually gonna learn something. I'm going to make sure that I have everything lined up properly. So let's see, these two and these two and these two and these and these and these. And so yes, this loop right here is the loop I want to go through. It's going to be difficult because it was my starting loop and it is kind of tight. But I will get my hook in there. We're gonna go right there. Okay, and then I'm going through the marked stitch, and now I'm taking my color A, and I'm going to make just a nice long tail and a slip stitch. Pull that, remove this stitch marker. Whoosh. Pull that slip stitch through and then go through the top of the next stitch of color A, the top of the next stitch of color B, yarn over, pull through everything to make a slip stitch, and now I'm just going to keep on slip stitching all the way around just like we did before. Okay, so I'm going to do this all the way around, and then we'll come back, finish this little piece up, and then we'll start joining. Well, actually, then we'll be able to put this, we'll be able to put the stuffed lining inside and start joining the rest of the body. It's going to be really exciting. All right, so I'll see you back here once I've gone all the way around. Okay, I've finished joining the inner legs to the body of Elihu on both sides. Okay, we went all the way around both of them, you see? And then what I did was I just gently wove in the ends. I pulled the ends to the inside and just kind of gently wove them in, and everything is good there. So now we're going to stuff Elihu into here. So we take our little lining, stuffed lining piece, and here is the trunk end, here is the trunk end of the crochet piece, and we're going to put his pants on. All right, so just slide those legs in and put his little pants on. Here we go. Okay, and make sure everything's nice and pushed down all the way. There we go. All right, we have started to stuff Elihu. Now, this next part, the very beginning of the next part, gets a little bit difficult. What you want to do is grab your color A yarn. Okay, make yourself a slip knot and remove the slip knot from the hook. Now take your hook, and you see this is the last stitch I worked into on the color B body. I already worked into that stitch. It's slip stitched into the inner leg, but I'm still going to put my hook through that same stitch, and then I'm going to go around to the color A body, and here is the last stitch that was joined to the inner leg. I'm going to put my hook through that stitch as well. Okay, and now I'm going to grab that slip knot, put it on my hook. Okay, and pull that through. Then put my hook through the top of the next stitch of color B and the top of the next stitch of color A. I'm gonna just kind of hold on to my yarn end tightly, yarn over, pull through to make a slip knot. Okay, and these first, oh no! Sorry, we're gonna make a slip stitch, not a slip knot, only apparently I can't do either. Okay, through B, through A, yarn over, pull through. This very first one is really difficult and a pain. Okay, there we go. And now we're going through the next one, through B, through the next stitch of B, through the next stitch of A, yarn over, pull through everything for another slip stitch. Okay, now we're just going to keep on doing that just like we did before, slip stitching every stitch together. And this under the neck part is going to be a little bit difficult. Then it's going to get easier until we get to the tip of the trunk. When we get to the tip of the trunk, things are going to get a little difficult once again, because we're going to need to make sure that the trunk is actually inside the crocheting. Okay, so let's go around to that point. Okay, the first time that I did this, when I made the original Elihu, when I got to about this point at the tip of the trunk, I slid the trunk in and continued to crochet the body together over top of the lining. But I think I'm going to try this a little differently this time, see if I can make it not quite so difficult. What I'm going to do is actually crochet this shut to a little ways down the trunk or up the trunk, and see if we can then just slide the trunk in the way we did with the legs, right? Why not? Why does it have to be so difficult? And hey, you know what? You might even want to try crocheting all the way up to like the top of the head before you stuff Elihu in there and see if that's easier for you. It might work. Now, our second round of crocheting this lining together, this outer body together is still going to be a little more difficult, but since the first round is already holding it where it needs to be, it won't be as difficult. So now let's see if I can just slide Elihu's trunk in here. Ready? Why not? Let's see. Go on in there, dude. It's working! Yay! All right, I think that's gonna work. Nice! Hey, hey! Yes, I was talking with a hook in my mouth. All right. So now we're just going to keep on crocheting. There we go. That actually was so much easier than trying to crochet it around the actual trunk. Let me tell you, that was no fun. All righty. Sometimes we learn from our silliness, right? You all were probably thinking that from the beginning. Why don't you just stuff the trunk in the same way you stuff the legs in? Why are you making it so difficult? Dude, apparently I like things difficult. All right, so now we're going to keep on. I'm just going to keep crocheting this body shut all the way to the back side, and then we're going to rejoin together to talk about continuing this all the way up to here, okay? Okay, so now we are the last few stitches here, joining the back end of Elihu. Oops. Okay. So let me get these last couple done. You want to make sure that you definitely repeat the very last stitch here and the very last stitch joined to the lining, to the inner leg over here. Okay. Oop, I went in the wrong spot. There we go. There and there. Okay. So now what we're actually going to do is I'm going to keep on going around, and I'm going to make another. You see how there are the chains on the blue side, on the yellow side? There are chains in yellow on the blue side. Now we're going to add chains in blue on the yellow side. So we're going to go through those same stitches, all right, and just kind of get our blue to go sort of underneath those yellow chains. So I'm going to go through this stitch and then through this stitch, but I'm making sure my hook comes out underneath the yellow chain so that the dashed line is going to kind of hide itself underneath that chain. I'm not coming out in the middle of the chain I made the first time we slip stitched together. I'm coming out underneath it. So we're going to keep doing that, and that gives us this fun little altering colors, alternating, not altering, fun little alternating colors. Gonna do that all the way until we get to the beginning, the first stitch we made in all of this, in the blue joining, okay? Okay, I've gone all the way around. I'm going to repeat the first stitch that I made here, okay? And now that I've done that, I'm going to cut my yarn, pull it through. So now that I have done that, we're going to repeat this process on this side with the yellow, with the other color, color B. So I need to find an end of my color B, and I'm going to start over on this side for my color B, because at this point everything's joined, right? So it doesn't really matter so much where you start. So I'm going to start on this side for my color B and just begin joining right here. I'm going to go through same place where I went through when I was doing my color A joining. I go through here and then go into the next one and make sure my hook is coming up under the color A joining. And I'm going to keep doing this all the way around. Now, if you decide that you want your Elihu to not be pulled quite, the crochet to not be pulled quite so tight, then what you would have wanted to do was sew your lining a little bit smaller than Elihu. So maybe instead of sewing on, tracing Elihu and sewing on the tracing line, maybe you sew about a 1/4 of an inch in the tracing line. So, a little bit, maybe just like an 1/8 of an inch or so in on the legs, but maybe like a 1/4 inch in on the rest of the body, and then an 1/8 of an inch in on the trunk as well. Okay, and that will make him a little bit, it'll make the lining a little bit smaller, and therefore it won't stretch the crochet quite so much. The reason why I do go ahead and have it so that it's stretching the crochet is because what I've had happen in the past with things, if I didn't stuff them enough, what happens is eventually the yarn, it grows, your crochet grows, your yarn grows, and then what happens is you need to add more stuffing in, and if you've made a lining like this has, then it's really difficult to add more stuffing in, and of course the lining doesn't grow the way that the crochet grows, and so you end up with something that's really, again, saggy, and saggy is kind of sad. So that's why I keep it nice and tight, but if it's a little too tight for you, just sew a little bit on the inside of the lines that you drew, okay? So I'm going to keep doing this all the way around, and then we're just going to go ahead and give him a few finishing touches. Okay, so I'm finishing up the color B outline here. Okay, and just making sure that I'm kind of going through everything, right? There we go. I want to go through the very last one, and I think I'm going to cheat a little bit here. Okay, I didn't do this with the other one because the two colors were so close, but what I'm going to do now, I cut that yarn, and I'm going to just kind of slide this underneath all of here. I don't want to make the yellow go over top of that blue, right? That would make me sad. So I pulled it through, and now I can do this next crochet stitch. There we go, and then pull that through without having the yellow going over top of the blue, because that would make me sad. All right, so you might find you need to do a little finagling that way. So now what I'm going to do is just kind of get rid of some of these little holes. So you can see this yarn comes out right here. I'm going to go over the next stitch, and I'm actually going to go all the way through, okay, here. And then I'm actually going to do that one more time on the next set of stitches. I'm kind of closing a tiny bit of the back of Elihu's legs this way. It's going to make him stand a little better, and it's also going to make sure that there's not too much stress on the seams of the crochet. Now I'm going back in the other direction. Okay, so I'm just kind of going back and forth a few times at this point, just to make sure that it's all nice and sturdy. Okay, just back and forth a few times. This is all going kind of underneath those chains that I made, and that way the back and forth so many times is really kind of the knot and weaving in the end, really, when it comes down to it. Okay, so I am going to kind of make a little bit of a knot now by just catching, well, actually, you know what? I'm not. I'm just going to go back and forth a few more times because I don't like knots on the outside of my work. So there we go. I went back and forth many times, and now I'm just going to kind of weave in underneath all of this. Okay, and I'll cut that in a moment. Now I'm taking this piece here. And I'm actually not going to try to make a duplicate stitch because this is so tight right here you can't see it. So again, I'm just going to go back and forth a couple times. All right, and then back down the other way. And this is just going to fasten things off and weave in the ends all at the same time. And now this time I'm going to kind of run it through all of these kind of chains to really weave that end in. And now I'm cutting those two ends. And you can see now it's nice and tight, and there's not that big gaping hole right here where it looks messy or where it feels like there's too much stress on the seams, and it also helps keep Elihu's legs going straight down. So that's one of the reasons why it's really good to start the second color right up here. Now I'm going to turn around. I'm going to do this same sort of idea on the neck, which is going to be a lot more difficult, okay? This is going to be much more difficult, but I'm going to do the same idea. I'm actually going to slide this yarn just underneath that yellow, okay? There we go, because I want to be working underneath the wraparounds. And I'm actually going to, you see how this has pulled these stitches really tight? I'm going to kind of try to grab some of those stitches that have been a little bit pulled out of shape, to see if I can just get them pulled in a little bit more, okay? And just going back and forth a couple times to just really tighten this up and make sure we don't have any sad gaping holes. And I'm going to keep going now, and so that I'm going back and forth actually through the trunk on this one. The other one I'm going to come back and forth down the legs to tighten up the legs. This one I'm going back and forth down the trunk a few times just to tighten up this piece. Oopsie, pulled it right off my needle. Okay, because we don't want them both going the same direction, or else you'll end up with big bulky sections. Okay, so I want to make sure I'm under the yellow, not on top of it. All right. And then just kind of go through some of these chains. I know this isn't the best visibility on this under the neck work here. Okay, could probably use a couple more hands. Now I'm going to go ahead and put this yarn on my needle, and now this is where I am going to go ahead and pull these two legs together. So I'm going to start right here underneath all of those chains. Okay, underneath all the chains, just a couple stitches. There we go. All right, so I'm trying to make sure you can see it. Ah! All right, so underneath all those chains. Okay, and I think that is far enough. So now I'm going to start going back up again. Let me just clip that. I already wove in that end. Let me clip it just so that it's not being such a pain. Okay, so there we go. So now we're going up again. And actually when I come back through this side, it looks like I have a little bit of a hole here with this blue. So I'm gonna pull that back up. There we go. Okay, and now I'm gonna go back down a little bit. Just getting this nice and secure so that again at this neck point there's not too much strain on those joinings of all those pieces, and also so that his legs stay pointing down instead of doing the splits. All right, so I think I've gone through enough now to where I can just kind of weave this in through a bunch of these chains, maybe, if I can actually do that. There we go. And a clip. All right, so you see again now there's not quite as much holes, not quite as many holes around the neck, and his legs are pointing down a little bit more. Okay, so now here we go. He's got his nice little back. He's got some nice shape here, nice shape here. He's got a cute booty and his legs are going the right way. He stands up. So now all you need to do is give him some eyes. You can just embroider them on, make little felt eyes, sew them on, however you want to do, depending on who you're giving this to. I just did a little, I embroidered mine on with the opposite color yarn, and I just made a plus and then an X that went over the plus. It's called a smeared knot. So I made the little plus sign and then I made the X over top of it for his eyes. And then for his tail, all you have to do is string some yarn. How many pieces did I do? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I must have cut 3 pieces of each color of yarn for a total of 6 pieces of yarn. And then you just pull them through here so they're folded in half. You braid them away, you tie a big knot, and then you kind of cut the ends unevenly to give him a little tail, and that is all it takes. Oh, ears. Elihu needs his ears, right? So his ears are opposite from his, the colors are opposite. And I dropped them down just a little bit. So what you might want to do is actually pin on the ears, okay? And then sew on your eyes. Put your eyes on before you actually attach the ears. I would definitely recommend doing it that way, where you first pin on the ears, try to get them nice and symmetrical, right? So you pin those little dudes on, and then you do his eyes, and then you sew on the ears. Because what you might find is once you do his eyes, you might go, oh, you know what, I think the ears need to be a little farther back or a little farther forward. So I would just pin them on first for reference, do the eyes, then if they need to be adjusted, adjust them, and then just use this little end to just sew on the ears right along this seam, or use a new piece of yarn or even just sewing thread to sew the ears on. All right, and that's all it'll take to finish up your Elihu.